All right, well, you'll remember, I hope you'll remember, that last week, as we were finishing up our final Bible study on the subject of the ARP vows and what they mean, your membership vows when you join the church, I had asked for suggestions for the next thing to study. And my daughter had actually suggested apologetics. And considering the number of individuals who are going to be heading off to university, it struck me as a good idea that we do that. So, and in seeking to determine which book I was going to teach on, for me it was kind of a no-brainer. I determined we were going to do The Universe Next Door by James Sire. Sire has since passed on he's gone on to his reward in heaven. But he, I think, produced the most digestible worldview approach to apologetics. So what he was seeking to do was to talk about what it is to have a worldview, and then to be able to understand and interpret the other competing worldviews out there. One of the points that he's going to make in this book is, whether or not you realize it, everyone has a worldview. Everyone has a conception of the universe, the way that it's put together. Now, their worldview may be it may be true, it may be partially true, or it may be completely false. Okay, but nonetheless, they'll have it. And as we'll see, it will be very important to understand what their worldview is. And if you are ever going to do any sort of evangelism, and in speaking to people, you'll need to understand worldviews and their worldview, and then be able to engage with their worldview. Also, we'll see in a little while, it's very important to understand worldviews, because everyone has a worldview, and every form of media out there has a worldview that they are constantly piping out. Okay, and so you need to be able to understand. If you understand worldviews, you'll be able to make informed decisions at critical points, especially when you're assessing information and assessing individuals. Anyway, we will see that. So, where is Isabel? I know. She gets her wish and then she takes off. Is that it? Okay, I understand. All right. Well, okay. In any event, let's go ahead and begin with some words of prayer. Tim, can I ask you to pray for us, please?
Yes.
Thank you, brother.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you and praise you that we're able to gather and to learn more about what it means to be ready, be prepared to give an answer for the hope that is within us. Father, I do ask and pray that you would use my brother here to instruct us and to teach us during this time, and grant us godly wisdom so that we will know how to speak to others, how to share the gospel with others, how to point others to Jesus Christ. Be with us now, we ask and pray in his name.
Amen. All right, a couple words before I get started on the first slide. I would like it, I can't order you to do it, but I would like it if you would read along. Each one of these chapters will take you about 20 minutes to read, so not too taxing. And you will get so much more out of the study if you are actually reading along. Tim?
I was going to mention, I gave my copy, I was telling Seth this earlier, I gave my copy away a few months ago when we moved, because I was downsizing, because it had been free on Audible, and I listened to it maybe 3-4 months ago on Audible. It may still be free if someone wants to try that option.
I think it might be still free on Audible as well. If you have Amazon Prime, I know it's free. The other thing to keep in mind is Kindle. You can get it for $6.99 and have it on your computer or phone automatically wherever you are. Also, Kindle has text-to-speech. So you can actually get, if you download the Alexa app on your phone, you can actually just say to Alexa, read The Universe Next Door, and she'll do that. Alexa, well, actually the bizarre thing is the voice on the one we have in our bedroom is an Australian man. And then, yeah, and then the one what's the one in the kitchen? It's an English woman, isn't it?
She's English.
Yes, English woman. So anyway, I wish they had a Texan option. That would be really cool. Anyway.
The Siri, I changed my Siri to a Texas-ish accent, and it's hilarious.
No doubt, no doubt. All right. So who doesn't have a copy of this? I'm about to give another one away. Everybody got one of these? Okay. I'll pick up like 4 more, and then we'll hand them out to, I know who doesn't have one. Isabel doesn't have one.
Oh, your family has one.
I go back. All right.
Mommy doesn't have one. I have an audio. I'm good.
All right. So when it comes to an examination of life, how we live, what we're living for, questions like that, there are a lot of people who who would say, "What's the point?" There was a famous statement that was made by an ex-British soldier who had gone to the American colonies and who had settled on what then was the frontier and had married an Indian woman. And he wrote, "Here I am, free and unrestrained, amidst the rude magnificence of nature, with this Indian woman by my side and this gun with which I can procure food when I want it. What more can be desired for human happiness?" And that was his expression. And Samuel Johnson, the famous wit, replied, "Do not allow yourself, sir, to be imposed upon by such gross absurdity. It is sad stuff. It is brutish. If a bull could speak, he might as well exclaim, 'Here I am with this cow in this grass. What being can enjoy greater felicity?'" And when you think about it as well, the bull might think it was doing very well at that moment in time, but of course, what happens to bulls eventually? They all end up, generally speaking, as hamburger or steak, or and so moving to the next slide. Well, actually, if you can go 2 slides in. As Socrates put it, the unexamined life is not worth living for a human being. All right, it should not be the case, and so many people do it without even thinking about it, that we should be going through our life without thinking about our purpose, our destiny, the greater questions. There are a lot of people who simply live day to day. They do their job, they go home, or they play games, they watch social media. You could live your entire life just swiping up and down and not really think for a moment about the purpose of life. And a lot of people hold, and as we shall be going and examining all of this, a lot of people hold worldviews that they don't realize are inconsistent with happiness. So for instance, if you are really a dialectical materialist, you don't believe in souls, you don't believe in any sort of, the existence of what we might call the spirit, you don't believe in God, you believe that everything was an accident, and that essentially the universe has been constant, and then there was this brief blip of life, and then eventually it'll die a heat death and everything will go away. What is the purpose of your life? The only, I suppose, consistent reaction to that would either be the despair of the French philosopher, or the eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, of the hedonist, because your life has no purpose, it has no relevance, and eventually you will fade away to nothing. So, but there are people who hold that who don't actually do the work of thinking towards, what does it all mean? They never allow their thoughts to stray in that direction. We should, though. That shouldn't be the case. So all of us have a worldview. Next slide, if you would. But what is a worldview? Jamie, can you read that?
A worldview is a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart. It can be expressed as a story or a set of presuppositions, assumptions which may be true, partially true, or entirely false, that we hold consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently, about the basic constitution of reality, and that provides the foundation on which we live and move and have our being.
All right, so the worldview is the background music that's always playing in our heads, in one sense. That it's also that which allows us to make sense of anything. We have certain assumptions that we may not even realize that we have. For instance, when you go to bed tonight and you drift off to sleep, what do you expect will happen next?
Wake up.
You will wake up in the morning, right? And what will have happened? It was dark when you went to sleep.
It'll be dark when I wake up.
There you go. No. All right. You expect that the following day the sun will rise, okay? That everything continues. Yeah, no, that everything continues as it always has been. In the morning, the sun arises. In the evening, it goes down. And we expect to see that pattern continuing. We don't expect, for instance, when we wake up and we walk out, we don't expect the sky to have miraculously turned purple or pink or some bizarre shade of teal or something like that. We will expect that will continue. We expect that we'll have abundant sunlight for a certain number of hours, that there will be oxygen to breathe in the morning and things like that, because we have a worldview which doesn't express, that there's sudden weird accidents that you might have in a cartoon world, that everything changes all of a sudden without any warning. So we expect continuity. The sun sets and the sun rises. But does our worldview allow us to have that kind of expectation? I would say the Christian worldview does. I would say the materialist worldview does not, actually. So, but a worldview is, moving on to the next slide, everyone has one loaded, okay? Unless they are very, very young. I'm pretty sure Adrian III does not have a worldview loaded yet. His parents will be trying to instill one in him for the next few years. And hopefully one will stick, the one that they want him to come away with, a Christian theistic worldview. And we'll talk about that worldview first. But everyone has a worldview. Jesse, can you read from there by any chance? Right. So, and when you think about it, the observance of the world, the expectations that we have, like for instance, I can't find my watch. What do I automatically begin to assume? Well, that the watch existed at some point, that it's not merely a false memory that's been planted in my head, and I'm actually a replicant. And therefore, there never was a watch, really. I only thought that there was a watch. So that literally could, if you didn't know for certain if anything in your past had actually happened, it would almost be paralyzing, wouldn't it? The question of what's real and what's not real and so on. Or if I thought that watches could wink out of being or sink through the table and into another universe or something like that, what would be the purpose of searching for my watch? I don't have any means of obtaining it from another, but we don't think that way. We immediately begin thinking, well, I must have put it somewhere, and I've just forgotten where it is. So, and we don't believe, for instance, that elves came out of the wall and took it, right? That doesn't, and it doesn't, but there have been people, okay, if you'd said elves have taken your watch, they'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Based on their worldview, So worldview affects even the simplest things that happen in your life and so on. The way that you think, the way that you live out your life, the commitments that you make or don't make, and so on. And worldview is, next slide, please. They are basically the glasses through which you observe the universe, all right? Your entire life is affected by your worldview. And you need to remember that the people that you're talking to, they have a worldview, and their view of the world is also affected by their worldview, okay? Their view of what's right and what's wrong will be grounded in some sense in their worldview. All right? I think a lot of, and this is very important, we'll discuss this in a little while, Christians in the modern era are going through this kind of wait, what moment, because they don't understand how radically different the worldview that the average American operates with is from a Christian worldview. And so some of the decisions that their fellow Americans make on a regular basis, we can't understand. They seem absurd. But they don't have the same presuppositions that we do. So moving to the next slide. So why study worldviews? Adrian, can you read that for us? Oh, I did the waiter thing. Hey, Joy, can you read that for us? If the answer is no, then
I don't have my glasses on.
I understand. Okay. All right, Bobby, go ahead.
Because on one issue I remain constant, I'm
Convinced.
that any of us, to be fully conscious intellectually, we should not only be able to detect worldviews of others, but be aware of our own. Why it is ours, and why in light of so many other options we think it's true.
Okay. Now, many people never in their entire lives examine their worldview or even are aware of it. They don't know why they believe what they believe, they just believe it. And there is a motive of teaching that has been popularized really since the Enlightenment, where you're not taught how to think, how to reason, how to deduce things. You're just taught what to think. Okay, you think this because everybody else does, and it's reinforced by the herd, so to speak. So everybody else in the crowd believes this, so I have to believe it. Why do you believe it, though? You believe that there's a good and an evil. Do you believe there's a God? No. Then that doesn't make any sense. Good and evil don't make any sense if there is no God. Dostoevsky is right. If there is no God, all things are permissible. All right? Because it's simply a matter of opinion. There's no chemical analysis that allows you to derive good. Okay, you can't go into a laboratory and distill good. You can't, there's no, or even come up with a mathematical function that will tell you what is good. You can determine through your senses perhaps what you would prefer, but you cannot determine through your senses what is good. We'll talk more about why that's the case later on. So moving to the next slide, if you would. Okay, that's Psalm. Okay, Adrian, you're up now. Who have set your glory above the heavens.
Out of the mouth of babes and nursing infants you have ordained strength, because of your enemies, that you may silence the enemy and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels, and you have crowned him with glory and honor. You have made him to have dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, even the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea that pass through the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth.
Okay, so there we have a worldview being expressed, and being expressed dramatically. This person has a worldview where if they look at the heavens, what does it tell them?
They're by design.
There is, they're there. It's by design. There is a God, and the heavens exist to do what? To glorify him. Okay, everything really is to glorify him. And because he is the creator of these things, he is above them, right? He's not just transcendent in terms of his place. He's greater than his creation. And the way that this is expressed, is he part of the creation? No. Okay? So that would immediately cancel out a number of the worldview being expressed here is not just deistic, okay? It is God is also working according to a plan and a purpose. He didn't just create these things and leave them. And we can know him, not just the things through which he's made, but also by knowing him. Out of the mouth of babes and nursing infants you have ordained strength because of your enemies, that you may silence the enemy and the avenger. He's working constantly with his people and so on. But this is not just a theistic worldview. It is a theistic worldview. It's a monotheistic worldview. There's one God. But also, we would say that this is, the foundation for a Christian theistic worldview. It's an analysis of the world that only makes sense if the God of the Bible exists. Okay? So, and everything that this person observes, note this, comes through the glasses of that worldview. He looks at animals, and he assumes that they were created by God, that they did not evolve over time. He looks at the fields, he looks at the stars, he looks at the water, and so on. And it's all God's handiwork, every part of it, including mankind, most importantly. And that they were made for a reason. You've made him to have dominion over the works of your hands. Where is God? Does God give man dominion? Genesis. In Genesis, that's right. And it's our calling. We are to, all these things are put under our feet. So therefore, who is the most important part of creation? Man. Okay, it's not blue whales. It's not eagles. It's not spider monkeys. It's man. Okay? O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth. So, and not only is it the case that we are supposed to know these things, how are we supposed to react? Yeah, in awe and praise and worship and adoration for our Maker. Okay, so that's a worldview. Who would say their own belief system is entirely compatible with this? Anybody? It's just me? Your own worldview is entirely compatible with this. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing 100% hands. I'm a little worried. There are some people here. The psalmist.
You look scary and
You would say in light of this, though, in light of Hebrews 2, that goes beyond this.
Right. No, that's why I said your own worldview is compatible with this. Okay, there's no No, I'm Jewish. Yeah. Right. Maybe I got. Excuse me? Absolutely, they do. Yeah, it does not include, obviously, the triune God, redemption through faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. It's tweaked. They are close, as we shall see. Yes?
You said that, maybe some forms of, the agnostics would also agree with this, maybe? Saying that the nature is evidence of God, but they don't necessarily know that.
No, an agnostic would say it's impossible to go from nature to God. You can't know. It literally cannot be known. All right, but let's go to the next slide. So that, Christian worldview. However, you need to realize that not everyone holds your worldview, the people you're meeting. So let's see how good you are with symbols. How about the one up here? What is? No? That's atheist. That's the atheist symbol. It's an atom with an A, atheist in it. Okay, next to it, the gold one. Which one is that? Buddhism. That's right. Yes, the one that looks like a ship's wheel is actually Buddhism. So it's the wheel of life. Okay, that goes round and round and round and round until we can escape to the center, which is nirvana, nothingness, and end to. So we're going to learn about as we discuss Buddhism. We're going to learn about samsara. The idea of reincarnation, what it's all about, why they believe in it, and so on. How about the one at the bottom on the left? No, not Hinduism specifically. It's New Age. Those are tarot cards around her. So those are the... And New Age is what? Well, okay, whenever you see... There are certain incompatibilities. New Ageism is actually a bringing together, a conflation of the occult and Eastern religions. So, for instance, there are some things here that they wouldn't even understand are incompatible. But you have here tarot cards, okay? Tarot cards come from what system? Yeah, well, it's the old European Wiccan. And then you have, what are the spots on her? Do you know? Chakras, which comes from Hinduism, okay, yoga, and so on. So, and there's others. I mean, I could spend, the rest of the time we have trying to explain all of the symbolism, but it's not worth it. Understand, though, that this is a bunch of different systems, mystical. We've even got over here. We have runes. Runes comes from Nordic mythology. All right, so it's just a conflation of all this mystic, non-Christian, pagan stuff, and there are vast incompatibilities in these systems, but they simply ignore them. Okay, so Joy.
But isn't all syncretism like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's making some compromise somewhere, and therefore it's inconsistent.
It's a drawing together of things that are often either self-refuting, or that when you bring them together, they nullify each other. So, but we'll talk more about that. We're going to discuss the New Age. Okay, how about the middle one? What did he say? Marxism.
That's your favorite, Pastor.
It definitely is not. Anyway, but thank you. So Marxism, incredibly, much more than we ever realized, incredibly, influential worldview in terms of modern America. The Marxist way of thinking, the Marxist dialectic, has so infused our culture that most people, if they bumped into somebody from the 19th century who didn't have a Marxist dialectic, they'd be like, "What? These guys are crazy!" They're because it's an oppressor-oppressed dialectic, and we all put everything is put on that spectrum. So, and then finally over here, Islam. Yeah. Okay. So the star and the crescent. Okay. So, but you will bump into people who hold one of these worldviews, if they're not Christian, or sometimes some sort of weird mishmash of more than one of these worldviews. So, for instance, in reality, there is no way to reconcile this with this, and yet tons of intellectuals on college campuses are trying desperately to make Islam and communism compatible. So, or they think that they are, So, in any event, moving to the next slide. All right, your first question. You got to work this one out. What problems might not recognizing or understanding someone else's worldview cause? Yes?
A lot of people make arguments that less concrete positions that the other person doesn't have. They're basically just arguing something that you would believe, but they have, they completely disagree with it. You got to start at the beginning. You got to go to stasis theory and find out what it is we believe.
Right. It might lead to, yes.
A misunderstanding where you're missing each other completely.
You're in different universes and you don't realize it. So, other problems. Yes, Adrian.
Just more like focusing on that concept. It's not getting the definitions right. So not only do they not believe what you believe in, but the same language you're using might not even mean the same thing in their mind at all. And so they're like, I agree with you, when really they don't, but because you didn't set that up beforehand.
Right. I can give you an example of a phrase where that happens all the time, Son of God. What is, an occultist could believe Jesus was the Son of God. They do not believe what a Christian theist believes, though, in that term. So, all right, other problems. Yes, Jamie.
Sometimes they can make their worldview sound very winsome,
Mm-hmm.
Very believable, and it helps in rejecting it by knowing what the false presuppositions, or oftentimes they're self-contradictory presuppositions that
Right.
The worldview stems from. And so even if they sound winsome or sound believable, if you're familiar with what they believe and know why it's wrong, and you easily reject it. Whereas if you didn't, you might be drawn in.
Right. Absolutely. Very good. Any other thoughts? We don't all have to have one. Yes, you've got two now. Yeah.
Straw manning, like you see a lot of that. People will create a false offer. People will try and counter the argument that they think they have, as opposed to not.
Right. That's not what it. Yeah. All right. Well, yes, Bobby.
And
Yeah.
I forgot who said this, that capitalism and Christianity don't mix. So that's a Marxist Christian. Christian socialist.
No. As we get to Marxism, we'll see why Marxism and Christianity are absolutely incompatible. But the economic system that's taught within the Bible is capitalism. So, all right, moving to the next one. Here's one of the, I'm giving you some answers for why it's important to understand these worldviews. Where's that, which movie is that from? Which one? Empire Strikes Back. Come on, yeah.
My bad.
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Okay, so that's Michael Scott doing Yoda. So the question that we have at this point is, what worldview is Yoda expressing? Okay, so you might say it's the Jedi worldview. Yes, but the Jedi worldview is actually a construct that was created by Bill, what's his name? No. Say what? George Lucas and, no, his friend, Bill. No, Bill, I'll get it later. My brain, my memory's dead. So in any event, okay, this is a New Age Eastern construct religion that borrows heavily from Buddhism and Hinduism. Okay, so
Hate leads to suffering.
is one of the ideas that Hinduism teaches in the wheel of life. Okay, that's why we have to divest ourselves of hate. And also, in a sense, we have to divest ourselves of love and all strong emotions. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and so on. Fear is the path to the dark side. This movie, believe it or not, was created as a vehicle to inject Eastern spirituality into America, okay, and to overcome Western spirituality, and to make a lot of money while you're doing it.
Bill Bradley?
No. I'll get it later. So, okay, so it would be George Lucas's Eastern religions, and he, NewsHour. No.
McNeil Laird.
No. It's going to drive me crazy. In any event, and this was actually a discussion that George Lucas was having. How would you teach Americans this system of belief that is so radically different? And through a story that has Western themes, knights and wizards, but behind all of it was the Eastern idea of the unity of the universe, the yin and the yang, the dark side and the light side. Even Darth Vader, Dark Veda, okay? The Vedas are the Hindu scriptures. The idea of an evil, powerful space wizard, but one who is using the wrong side of the Force, who's running in the wrong direction. But anyway, but you don't know all of that stuff, so you digest it. You take it in. Yes, Joy. Yes, Joseph Campbell. Thank you. Will, yeah, no. I am so sorry. Yeah.
What's Darth Vader's wife's name? Don't say it.
I know the answer, though.
Ella.
Ella Vader. That's good. That is a good dad joke. Quality dad joke. All right, so that's one. Okay, so you can inject, if you're not aware of the Eastern worldview, if you don't know about samsara, the cycle of life, if you don't know about the idea of, the unity of the universe, and pantheism, for instance, these ideas can be fed to you, and you can find them very reassuring. And that's why there were, in Britain, there was a huge number of people who, to this day, tick the box for Jedi religion. In fact, at one point, there were more people ticking the box for Jedi on the census than for Christian. So, yeah, no, it is. That's my country that I have nothing to do with anymore. Anyway, moving to the next. All right, so you can inject it via movies. Now, if you were a kid when I was a kid, this man's series, everybody was talking about. Absolutely, okay? And this is a worldview as well, and a very strong worldview that, Jane, can you read that?
The cosmos is all that is or ever was, or ever will be. Our feeblest contemplations of the cosmos stir us. There is a tingling in the spine, a catch in the voice, a faint sensation of a distant memory, as if we were falling from a great height. We know we are approaching the greatest of mysteries.
Okay, and that was how he began the series. The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be, okay? What worldview is that?
Evolutionary.
Materialism, okay, and we'll talk about that, or naturalism as it's sometimes called. All right, nature is all there is. This exists. The idea that there's a soul within me does not exist, okay? Therefore, what am I? I'm just...
Star stuff.
Well, yeah, and I am... Right, I'm a wet machine. That's all I really am. And eventually, the machine breaks, and then what do you do with the machine that's broken? If you can't, fix it, you throw it out. It's worthless. But, it was the wonder of the universe, the creation. But what's really happening in this is that, first off, obviously there's no place for God in any of this. And he was very clear about that. But instead of worshiping God, what are we supposed to worship? Nature, the universe, God's creation. Okay? Instead of worshiping the one who made the universe, we worship the universe itself and its components and so on. So that's the tingle, Here's another one. Let's go to the next slide. Who's that? Bernie, okay.
Sorry.
Who called you, honestly? Now, I was going to call on you to read, but not now. Caleb, you get to read this one. What's that called? That system that he said. That's Marxism. Okay? The workers shall control the means of production is a core Marxist idea. But there are countless people who, when you put Bernie Sanders on a presidential ballot, who you could say to them, okay, would you want to live in a communist state? Oh, no, I don't want to live in a communist state. Would you want to vote for Bernie Sanders? Oh, yes, I'll vote for Bernie Sanders. Because they don't understand that his worldview is Marxism, okay? So there's not a part of the Marxist worldview he doesn't embrace. So, but so what I'm making the point, if we don't understand worldview, then politicians can pull the wool over our eyes very, very easily and get us to accept ideas that are absolutely opposed to our worldview, okay? The state being in charge of all the means of production is something that you will only see in a communist country. Even in socialist countries, you don't have the state entirely in charge of all of those things. So, okay, so moving on. That's just one example. But as we go through this, there's going to be four basic purposes behind our study. The first is to outline basic worldviews that underlie the way we think. Okay, you may not realize it, but the way you think about the entire world it rests upon your worldview, consciously or unconsciously. Trace historically how these worldviews developed and how they got into into the Western nations, because at one point there was really only one worldview in the Western world. Or functionally. What was that? Christian theism. Okay, and that was something that is very important as well because, and we've forgotten this, the way that we became the great melting pot, we're able to take in all of these disparate cultures and so on, mostly from Western Europe and Eastern Europe and Southern Europe and so on. The way we were able to digest them is we all had a common what? We had a common worldview. Okay, so even if you were Roman Catholic, Protestant, Unitarian, or whatever, you still believed in basically Judeo-Christian morality. Okay, and I'm still willing to say Judeo-Christian because it's, the idea is that the Ten Commandments are the core of our ethical values. So even if you did not believe that Jesus was really the Son of God, that he died to save us from our sins, that faith in him is necessary for salvation and so on, you had basically an agreement over what's good, what's evil, and so on. You also had a basic agreement on things like, Paul said what? If a man would not work, shall not eat. Okay, everybody coming out of Europe had that idea. Yes?
If we all had a basic agreement on the moral principles, why do we have a civil war with slavery?
Okay, so we have a basic agreement on the big ticket issues, but the actual application of them, was various groups. So, for instance, the ARP. The ARP was on the wrong side of the conflict. We were pro-slavery. But the RPCNA was anti-slavery. But if you look at the basic, where they come out of, and the differences between somebody in the ARP and somebody in the RPCNA in 1860, the differences would have been minuscule in their worldview. Go ahead. Okay, the Southern Synod, though, yeah. A lot of ARPs went and joined the RPs as well. So, yes.
A significant difference then between an ARP and RPCA would be that one was racist and one was not. One was pro-slavery. I mean, that's a huge difference.
Right. Okay, so they would not have viewed themselves. The fact is that actually both sides would have espoused what we would call racism at that point in time. But one was against slavery, race-based chattel slavery, and one was not. One saw it. And the odd thing is they would both be arguing from the Bible. That's the other thing. What is your basis for this position? If you'd ask the Southern Synod ARP guy, he would say, well, slavery is in the Bible. Most of if we're saying slavery is sinful, we're saying David was a sinner in that respect. Abraham was a sinner. Going through, you go through all the patriarchs, we're not only that, we're saying Paul does not explicitly say that Philemon, that he was a sinner as well.
Well, there's male and female servants in the New Testament.
Right. Well, and the majority of the Christians at the time of the New Testament were slave owners as well. So, or slave owners or slaves. That was the contrast. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that's true. Roman slavery was pretty awful.
Romans are a different animal, but I mean, as far as the Jews, when they had servants or slaves.
Yeah, they were supposed to, but you remember the Jews often broke, for instance, a Jew was supposed to allow his slaves to go free at what point? During the Jubilee. But Jeremiah, one of the major points of contention is they are refusing to allow their Hebrew servants to go free. And when they do finally free them, then they're like, oh no, we need to bring them back. So they weren't even obeying the rules there. Slavery's always been pretty awful, as a general rule. There's worse kinds. So, for instance, there have been nations that have just treated slaves as very disposable. You chain them to an oar, make them pull it for however many weeks they can, and then once they get too weak, you throw them overboard and get another one. That was throughout the Roman, the Carthaginians practiced that. Oh, the Aztecs, for instance, what did they often use their slaves for? Sacrifices, human sacrifice. So cutting out their hearts and so on. While they were alive. But in terms of the basic binding worldview that existed in America in 1860, prior to the Civil War, even though tensions between North and South were going through the roof, they still had more agreement than, say, a Christian and let's face it, the average Planned Parenthood supporter. The differences there are wildly different, because they have a different view of right and wrong. They have a different view of what the basis of life is, where we came from, things like that. So we don't even agree about the nature of sexuality. Can men get pregnant? I mean, there's a huge group of people out there who think men can get pregnant. In 1860, they would never have, it would have been impossible to have that kind of decision. Yes?
Well, I do agree that a lot of the Sozonos, a certain amount of Sozonos did make some arguments for the Bible. We read a book in this year called Battle Cry of Freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The South and the North. A huge part of the argument, especially from the Supreme Court, which the Southern dominated at the time, was that it wasn't about Bible, non-Bible, whatever. It wasn't an argument for the Bible. It was a preservation of simple Southern morality. Basically, their argument was with the South, slavery is Southern, so we have to keep saying slavery. And so I don't think it was really rooted in a biblical worldview. It was rooted in a selfish worldview by saying that, hey, if we don't have slaves, we're not going to be a South anymore, and the North is going to have power. I don't think they were arguing often. I mean, rarely do you see an argument in it about slavery. You see an argument about Northern oppression over a biblical argument.
The problem is, if you take a look at, and I mean, I hate to admit this, if you look at the Reformers, if you look at the men of the Second Reformation, the Puritans, and then the 17th century, they were all very much, no, slavery is biblical. As long as we're not enslaving, as long as we're not man-stealing or taking people who are unworthy of being slaves. So I mean, for instance, when it came to the Greeks, the Greeks weren't offended by the Spartans' slavery. The Greeks were offended by the fact that the Spartans made slaves of other Greeks, the Helots. That was what, so an Englishman would have been appalled at the idea that you can make an Englishman into a slave. However, he had no problem making an Irishman into a slave in indentured servitude. The colony of Georgia, for instance, was largely a penal colony, kind of like Australia. They were sent there they had to work for a certain number of years before they had any chance of getting their freedoms. So slavery was something that men were making arguments from the Bible. Our Reformed forefathers were through the 1500s, the 1600s, well into the 1700s. It wasn't until you had, for instance, groups like, I see the hand, you had groups like the Clapham sect, and you had men like, Amazing Grace, help me. Wilberforce. In British politics, arguing from a Christian standpoint that slavery is evil, that slavery is, and then you had men like, in America, you had guys like Samuel Miller, who was the first professor of history at Princeton. He was part of the abolition movement, and he was making arguments from the Bible that slavery, and he said it had a morally degrading effect wherever it was implemented, that the morals, the laziness became the rule of thumb. And he appealed to both the Bible and to places like Roman history. You can't argue that the decline of Rome wasn't accelerated by the fact that everybody who was doing any work after a certain point in time was enslaved. So in any event, yes, you had your hand up. I want to give you one last bite.
So my point is that while there were people in the beginning who did argue for some form of slavery, the slavery they weren't arguing for was the southern slavery of going to Africa, basically stealing African natives and bringing them to America. That was often the slavery they were arguing for from the Bible. It was later the southern slavery was defended by simply the existence of the South, saying that northern oppression is basically...
Well, okay, so... The Civil War was, I'm not going to argue that it wasn't the underlying cause of the slavery, that slavery wasn't the underlying cause of the Civil War. However, by that time, there were huge disagreements between the North and the South in terms of agrarian policy versus industrialization. So, for instance, the North wanted massive tariffs in order to build up their industry and prevent England from mass exporting finished goods at incredibly cheap rates. The South wanted to buy them because they were offloading their cotton to the mills in Birmingham. So the idea of tariffs, you could be, for instance, you could live in Savannah, and you could say, oh, I abhor slavery. I don't own any slaves myself, but then support secession because you had, your business was exporting cotton to England, and you didn't want the tariffs that Lincoln was talking about coming into effect. So, I mean, we see how the negative effect of tariffs upon culture and society from what's going on now. But we're getting so far afield. This is not a discussion of... anyway, I cannot... all right, so 2, trace historically how these worldviews developed. And then 3, show postmodernism's twist. And then 4, understand ourselves and others so we can genuinely communicate. That's of critical importance in life. Let's go to the next. Now, Sire sets forth 8 basic questions. First, what is prime reality? Where do you start from everything? Okay, so all of this exists. Why? Okay, and here we have 2 different. We have 2 radically different explanations. On the left-hand side, we have what? Yeah, the monotheistic religions. Okay, so what's the explanation for why everything is? God. Okay, everything goes back to God. On the other hand, we've got the cosmos, materialism. Okay, yeah, Big Bang. All right, so and one of the things that we did for many years was we tried to pretend these 2 were compatible. In the United States, they're not. They're absolutely incompatible. Moving to the next. Okay, so what is the second one? Is what is the nature of eternal reality, external reality rather, as we perceive it, the world around us? Okay, so in the first we have what? Okay, so God created the world, therefore it exists. Yes, there you go. Reality is real. There really is a pulpit made of wood here. Okay, so that's it. The next is a scene from what? Matrix. And this is the idea that you live in what? An illusion, or that the world either doesn't exist. There's an entire religion that believes that, Christian Science. Okay, now it's becoming incredibly popular to speculate that we live in a what? Simulation. Who believes that? No, somebody very, very powerful believes that. I mean, literally believes that. Elon Musk believes we live in a simulation. And he is at the right hand of the president. So somebody who believes the world doesn't really exist is one of the most important advisors in the White House. So.
How does that play with his worldview, though, if he's wanting to occupy Mars and get off?
Well, I suppose part of it is this, maybe it's not, but then you're playing the game. He's also a gamer. And what does he play? He plays, the immersive games where you're running around as another character. So he's a gamer. He wants to win. And so, in this simulation, the only way that we can, winning would be the survival of the human race. And the only way he sees in this simulation for us to continue on is by going from planet to planet to planet.
Yeah,
so.
Made public notices of the calling Democrats the death cult, populist world.
Right.
So those are all within his worldview of the game.
Survival and accumulating the most toys is the objective. That's how we win the game. So, okay, move to the next. One of the other critical questions, the third critical question is, what is a human being? And here we have 2 explanations for what is a human being illustrated. What's the one on the left?
A Webb machine.
Yeah, we're biomechanical machines, all right? And that's it. There's no soul. We're just neurons firing, or in my case, neurons not firing. And then on the right-hand side, we have what? Right, this is from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and it's, man created in the image of God. All right, moving to the next. The fourth, what happens at death? Okay, on the left-hand side, we have Hinduism. We have the endless cycle of reincarnation. Birth, death, rebirth, and so on, and it keeps going on and on and on. The idea being that our objective in life is to do what? To escape from the cycle, okay? And this is done via coming to an enlightened consciousness. On the right-hand side, we have, the celestial city, okay? We are headed for heaven because of what Jesus did. But those are 2 totally entirely differing and contradictory ideas. The funny thing is, I can't tell you how many people who call themselves Christians actually believe the left-hand one, which is bizarre to me. Moving on. Yes, somebody had their, oh, yes.
I think the important component is as we go through the worldviews, and because people, like you just said, there's an overlap where influence has appealed in some measure, and to be useful with that information. Like, for example, I know, like, when I was evangelizing Buddhists, I would start off with that we agree on something. We believe in suffering. I believe that this is a world of sin and misery, but the source is different and the solution is different. You know, so we should be looking for launching off points of agreement, so that we can, you know, because we all operate in this world, so there are sources of agreement, even, you know, like reason. If you're not going to reason with the person, then what is evangelism? What is apologetics? Because it's giving a reason for the hopes that you have within you.
Okay. Going to the next. Why is it, the fifth question he's going to be dealing with is, why is it possible to know anything? All right. Basic question of epistemology. How do we know? Why do we know? How is it possible to know? The Christian understands everything that understanding is possible because we were created reasonable creatures by our Creator and in His image. So man was created in the image of God. And we have 126 and 127. Then in the second picture, what do we have? Evolution. Okay. We go from sentient or non-sentient to sentient and able to reason. So we grew in the ability to use tools, think logically. We became reasonable through simply an evolutionary process that affected our brains. Move to the next one. There's just two to go after that. How do we know what is right and wrong? On the left hand, we have the answer is God tells us. All right, in His Word. On the right hand, we have Rodin, the thinker. What does that imply? We can think our way through to what's good and what's evil. But as we'll see, that's not the case. Moving to the next. What is the meaning of human history? Where is it going? In the left-hand one, we have where are we headed for? New heaven and a new earth. On the right-hand side, however, we've got, again, the circle of samsara. It's not going anywhere. History is literally circular. All right? It's not linear. It doesn't go from good to bad. So, and last one. What personal life-orienting core commitments are consistent with this worldview? So on the left-hand side, you have man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. Whose worldview is that? Ours, I hope, right? That's what you're here for. That's what you are. Your entire eternity is supposed to be spent doing. And then on the right-hand side, we have the materialism. Elon Musk, right? You know, he who dies with the most toys wins. So we'll see why, if you have that view, he who dies with the most toys wins, anything's okay, really. And you're only self-restraining in society.